I was sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning when my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was different, cold, calculated, and something I'd never heard before. She said 4 words that changed everything. We need to talk about the house. I didn't know it yet, but my entire family had been planning something that would tear us apart, something that would force me to prove something I thought was already proven, and something that would show me exactly who my family really was. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my family tried to steal the one thing that was truly, completely, 100% mine, and how I had to destroy them to keep it. But before I tell you what happened that day, you need to understand how we got here. Because this isn't a story that started last week or last month. This story started 17 years ago, on a day that changed my life forever. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, working my first job at a marketing firm, making barely enough to pay rent. My life was small, but mine. My dreams were big, but uncertain. And my family was, well, my family was everything I thought I could depend on. My parents weren't wealthy. My father was a mechanic. My mother worked part-time at a grocery store. We lived in a modest neighborhood, drove old cars, and took vacations to my grandmother's cabin instead of resorts. But we were close. Or at least, I thought we were. My grandmother on my father's side was different, though. Her name was Eleanor, and she was the successful one in the family. She'd married a banker decades ago, and when he passed away, he left her with a substantial estate. She owned several properties, investments, and money in the bank. But more than anything, Eleanor was independent. She was strong. She was the matriarch of our family, and we all looked up to her. She also had no filter. She'd say exactly what she thought, whether it was kind or cruel. And she loved me in a way that sometimes felt like the only real love I had. When I was 23, barely making ends meet in a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, Eleanor called me. She asked me to come visit. Just her and me, no one else. I'll never forget that day. Eleanor lived in this beautiful old Victorian house on Maple Street. It had a wraparound porch, stained glass windows, and a garden that looked like something from a magazine. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, the kind of place where you could imagine having a real life, not just existing, but actually living. We sat in her kitchen over tea and homemade pie. She asked me about work, about my dreams, about what I wanted from my life. And I was honest. I told her I wanted security. I wanted a home of my own someday. I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away. Eleanor listened. And then she said something that made my entire body go still. I want you to have the house on Maple Street. I thought she was joking. I laughed, but she wasn't smiling. I'm serious, Sarah. I'm getting older. I don't know how much time I have left. And I look at you, and I see someone who deserves to have a foundation under her feet, a place that's hers, where she can build her life. I remember starting to cry. I remember her taking my hands across that kitchen table and saying words I'd replay in my head 1,000 times. But we're going to do this the right way. We're going to do this legally. I'm going to add your name to the deed, both our names, and when I'm gone, it's yours. But more than that, I'm doing this now so you know, while I'm alive, that I believe in you. I was in shock, complete shock. But Eleanor had already talked to her lawyer. The next week, we went to his office, a stuffy place with wood paneling and old books. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson, explained everything in detail. Eleanor was adding my name to the property deed. We would be co-owners, equal partners. When she passed, the house would automatically be mine. No waiting for probate, no fighting with other family members, no lawyers fighting over her will. It would be clear, simple, and legally binding. I signed the papers. Eleanor signed the papers. We had witnesses, we had documentation, we had everything recorded in the county registry. I was now a homeowner. Well, I was a co-owner. But the important thing was, that house was legally mine. My mother cried when I told her. Happy tears, I thought. My father hugged me. My siblings congratulated me. Even my aunts and uncles seemed genuinely happy for me. I had no idea that they were already doing the math in their heads. For the next 3 years, things were normal. Better than normal. I moved into the house with Eleanor. We had this incredible relationship. She was my grandmother, but she was also becoming my best friend. She taught me how to cook, how to tend the garden, how to be confident in myself. Eleanor was 78. She was still strong, still sharp, still funny. But I could see her slowing down. The stairs became harder. The garden required more help. And slowly, I became her caretaker in the way that mattered. My family would visit. Sunday dinners, holidays, birthdays. They'd see me taking care of her, helping her bathe, managing her medications, driving her to doctor's appointments. And I saw something shift in their eyes. A calculation. A realization. The house was worth money. And Eleanor was getting older. I didn't understand what I was seeing at the time. I was just doing what you do for family. I was being a good granddaughter. I was being a good person. 3 years later, Eleanor had a stroke. It wasn't severe, but it changed things. She recovered most of her mobility, but mentally she was different. Slower. Confused sometimes. More dependent. And that's when my family started coming around more often. It started subtly. My mother would call more often, asking to come over. My brother, who I barely saw before, suddenly wanted to help with Eleanor's care. My sister started appearing on weekends. Even my uncle, who lived 2 states away, made surprise visits. At first, I thought it was nice. I thought they cared. I thought Eleanor's stroke had reminded them that family matters. I was so naive. But looking back, I can see the moment things shifted. It was during a family dinner, maybe 6 months after Eleanor's stroke. We were all sitting around the dining room table. My parents, my 2 siblings, my uncle, and Eleanor. I was serving the food, and I overheard my brother talking to my uncle in low tones. The house has to be worth at least $2 million now, maybe more. That neighborhood is coming up. My uncle nodded. And she's getting older. Her mind isn't what it was. I felt something cold run down my spine, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself they were just making conversation. People talk about real estate all the time. I was wrong. Over the next few months, the conversation started. Innocent-sounding questions that weren't innocent at all. My mother would ask, "Does Eleanor have a will, do you think?" And when I'd say I didn't know, she'd say, "You should make sure you understand the legal stuff, honey. These things get complicated." My brother would mention casually that he and his wife were thinking about buying a house. Houses are so expensive these days. I don't know how we're ever going to afford one. It's not like some of us got lucky with property. My sister would visit Eleanor alone, something she'd never done before, and they'd have long conversations behind closed doors. When I'd ask Eleanor what they talked about, she'd get confused and say she couldn't remember. And then, about 8 months after her stroke, my parents asked to meet with me. Just the 3 of us, in the living room, on a Saturday afternoon. I remember standing there looking at their faces and knowing that something bad was about to happen. My father cleared his throat. My mother looked at the floor, and my father said words that I couldn't quite believe I was hearing. "Sweetheart, we've been talking about the house, about Eleanor, about what happens next." My stomach dropped. "Eleanor is going to need more care," my mother continued. "She's going to need medical help, probably physical therapy, eventually maybe full-time nursing. That's going to be expensive, very expensive. We think," my father said slowly, "that it makes sense for Eleanor to tap into the equity in this house. There are loans she can take out, reverse mortgages, home equity loans. It would give us the money we need to care for her properly." I felt my hands get cold. "And," my mother continued, and I could see her struggling with the words, "we think that you should consider letting your brother buy the house. He and Jessica want to start a family. They need a place. This house is beautiful. And honestly, sweetie, it's a lot of responsibility for you." I remember standing there completely still, trying to process what I was hearing. "You want me to sell Eleanor's house," I said slowly. "Your mother's house, to my brother." "Not sell," my father corrected, "but use the equity. And yes, eventually, maybe the house should go to someone who can really take advantage of it. Someone building a family, someone with a real career." The implication was clear. I wasn't building enough. I wasn't successful enough. I wasn't worthy enough. "Eleanor's name is on the deed," I said quietly. "My name is on the deed. You can't ask me to do this." My mother's face changed. It got harder, colder. "We're not asking," she said. "We're telling you what's best for this family. And if you can't see that, then you're being selfish. You're thinking about yourself instead of about taking care of your grandmother." What happened next was a slow campaign. Not a war, that would have been honest. It was worse than a war. It was a manipulation. My mother would call and say things like, "Your father is so worried about how we're going to afford Eleanor's medications." She'd add guilt to every conversation, layers and layers of it. My brother would text in the family group chat about his wife's pregnancy, which I didn't even know about. And my mother would respond with congratulations followed by, "It's so sad that some people don't understand what it means to contribute to family." My sister would visit Eleanor and come back saying things like, "Grandma seems so confused. I think she's worried about money. Don't you think she's worried about money?" And slowly, the message became clear. If I truly loved Eleanor, if I truly cared about my family, I would give up the house. But here's what nobody said out loud, what I came to understand later. They didn't actually care about Eleanor's medical bills. My parents had money saved. My father's retirement was substantial. They could have paid for her care 100 times over. What they wanted was the house, and they wanted to make me feel like a bad person for not giving it to them. What I didn't realize until much later was that Eleanor saw all of this happening. She might have had memory problems, but she wasn't stupid. She knew her family, she knew what they wanted, and she was horrified. One day, about a year after the initial conversation with my parents, Eleanor called me to her room. She was having a good day, sharp, clear, present. She took my hand and she said, "They want the house. Your family wants it." "I know," I admitted, "but you're not going to give it to them." It wasn't a question. "No," I said, "I'm not." And Eleanor squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. "Good," she said, "because I gave you that house for a reason. I gave it to you because I see something in you that your family refuses to see. I gave it to you because you deserve to have a place where you're safe, where you can't be thrown out, where you can build a life on your terms." She paused, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Don't let them take it from you," she whispered. "Not for guilt, not for love, not for anything. That house is yours. It's your security. And once you lose it, you'll never get it back." Those words became my anchor. Everything that came after, I held on to those words. 2 years after Eleanor's stroke, things escalated in a way I wasn't prepared for. My family hired a lawyer. I found out when I received official documentation in the mail. A letter from an attorney named David Foster. He represented my parents, my brother, and my sister. And the letter was asking, no, demanding, that I agree to either A. Sell the house and split the proceeds equally among all family members. B. Take out a reverse mortgage against the house to fund Eleanor's care, with repayment coming from my future inheritance. C. Voluntarily remove my name from the deed. If I didn't agree to one of these options, the letter stated, they would take legal action. I remember sitting at that kitchen table, holding that letter, and feeling like I couldn't breathe. They were going to sue me. My own family was going to take me to court to try to steal my house. I did what Eleanor had told me to do months before. I prepared. I gathered everything. I got the original deed with both Eleanor's and my signatures. I got the documents from the lawyer's office showing the legal transfer. I got bank statements showing that Eleanor had not contributed to the house's expenses. I had paid the property taxes, the maintenance, the insurance. I had canceled her other properties to cover the costs of her medical care. But this house, our house, I had kept secure. I also did something that would prove to be crucial. I started documenting everything. I recorded conversations with my family members. I took screenshots of text messages. I saved emails. I documented dates and times of visits, conversations, and requests. In some places, recording without consent is illegal. But I lived in a state where two-party consent didn't apply to my own actions. I could record conversations I was part of. And I found Eleanor's lawyer. Mr. Henderson was still alive, still practicing. I met with him and explained the situation. He reviewed all my documentation, and he said something that made me feel like I could breathe again. You have an ironclad case. Your name is on the deed. Eleanor was of sound mind when she added your name. This was a deliberate, legal, witness transaction. What your family is trying to do is not only unlikely to succeed, it's actually frivolous. It might even border on harassment. He paused and looked at me seriously. The question isn't whether you'll win, Sarah. The question is whether you want to destroy your family to do it. That was the real decision I had to make. Before I responded to the lawyer's letter, I decided to confront my family face to face. I called a meeting. All of them. At the house. On a Sunday afternoon, they all showed up. My parents, my siblings, my uncle, my aunt, even some cousins. They sat in the living room like they owned it, like they already had won. I stood in front of them. I got the letter from your lawyer, I said calmly, and I want to be very clear about something. This house is mine. It's legally mine. Eleanor put my name on the deed when she was completely clear-minded. She did it intentionally. She did it because she wanted to make sure I had security. My mother started to speak, but I held up my hand. And I want to tell you something else. I don't care that you're disappointed. I don't care that you feel entitled to this property. I don't care about your financial struggles or your plans for the future. Those are not my problems. They are not my responsibility. My father was red in the face. My brother looked at his shoes. My sister had tears in her eyes. If you continue with this lawsuit, I will fight you with everything I have. I will win, and I will make sure that every detail of this betrayal comes out. I will document your attempts to manipulate Eleanor, your attempts to manipulate me, and your attempts to steal something that was never yours to have. I paused. I wanted to make sure they understood. And then, I'm going to walk away from all of you. You will never see me again. You will never know your grandmother again. Because people who love you don't sue you for your home. The silence in that room was absolute. You have 1 week to withdraw the lawsuit. After that, I'm responding through my attorney, and I'm filing a countersuit for harassment and emotional distress. Then I left the room. I went upstairs to sit with Eleanor, and I cried. That week was the longest week of my life. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about what I'd said, wondering if I'd been too harsh, too cold, too final. Part of me wanted to call my mother and apologize. Part of me wanted to give them something, anything, just to make this go away. But Eleanor wouldn't let me. You're doing the right thing, she said. Every time I wavered, she told me that. You're protecting yourself. You're not being cruel. You're being honest. On day 5, I got a call from my mother. She was crying. We're withdrawing the lawsuit, she said. Your father, he can't go through with it. He loves you too much. I should have felt relief, but I didn't, because I knew what this meant. It meant the lawsuit was withdrawn, but the betrayal wasn't. The attempt to steal from me wasn't undone. The manipulation, the guilt-tripping, the legal threats, those were still real. They just didn't want to lose me enough to push all the way. After that week, things changed. My parents would call and I wouldn't answer. My siblings would send texts and I wouldn't respond. My family would show up at the house and I wouldn't open the door. I didn't make a dramatic exit. I didn't yell or cry or have some big confrontation. I simply stopped. I stopped being available. I stopped believing in them. It was the quietest break, and somehow it was the most devastating. For about a month, they tried to reach out. My mother would call and leave voicemails about wanting to make things right. My father came by the house and asked to talk. My sister sent a letter saying how sorry she was. But I didn't forgive them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Eleanor died 3 months later. Eleanor had another stroke. Bigger this time. She went to the hospital and I sat in that ICU room holding her hand, and I knew it was the end. She couldn't speak, but she could look at me. And in that last look, there was everything she'd ever told me, everything she'd ever believed about me, all her strength and stubbornness and love, concentrated in one moment. I told her, I have the house. I kept it safe, just like you wanted me to. And I think she heard me. She died on a Tuesday. It was raining, and the world felt a little bit colder. The funeral was horrible. My family was there, trying to hug me, trying to reconcile, trying to act like the past few months hadn't happened. I accepted their embraces numbly. I sat in the front row and I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because my sadness was too big for tears. At the funeral reception, my mother pulled me aside. "We should talk about the house," she said gently, "about what's going to happen next." And I realized she hadn't given up, even now, even with Eleanor dead and in the ground. "The house is mine," I said coldly. "It was legally mine before Eleanor died. The deed doesn't change. Nothing changes. It's still mine." My mother's face hardened. Eleanor's will leaves everything else to be split equally among her children. That includes her bank accounts, her other properties, her investments. That's substantial money, Sarah. Money that legally belongs to all of us. "Eleanor's will," I said, "is between Eleanor and her estate attorney. It has nothing to do with me or the house." "But the house is part of the estate." "No," I interrupted. "The house is not part of the estate. The house has been my property for over a decade. My name is on the deed. It was transferred to me when Eleanor was alive. It's not in her estate. It never will be." I watched my mother's face as the reality of her situation became clear. She couldn't take the house. Not legally. Not without a long, expensive court battle that she would lose. The money from Eleanor's estate, which was substantial, was being divided among Eleanor's 3 children. My parents would be comfortable. They would be fine. But they wanted more. They wanted the house, and I was never going to give it to them. After Eleanor's death, I had to decide what to do with the house. With her things, with the life we'd built together. I could have sold it. The house was beautiful, in a nice neighborhood, worth a significant amount of money now. I could have sold it and used the money to move away, to start fresh, to stop seeing my family's betrayal every time I walked in the door. But I didn't. Instead, I made a choice that surprised even me. I decided to stay, to live in that house, to make it mine in a way it had never been before. I took Eleanor's things and I packed them away carefully. Her clothes, her jewelry, her books. I kept what mattered, her recipes, her photographs, her letters, and I gently let go of the rest. I painted the walls, I rearranged the furniture, I planted new things in the garden, not to erase Eleanor, but to honor her by living fully in the life she'd given me. And slowly, the house became less about what had happened and more about what I was building. 6 months after Eleanor's death, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Mr. Henderson, Eleanor's lawyer. "I have something you need to see," he said. "Can you come to my office?" I was nervous driving there. I didn't know what this could be about. The will had been read. The estate had been settled. What else could there be? Mr. Henderson looked serious when I sat down. He slid a folder across his desk. "Eleanor came to see me 2 weeks before her stroke," he said. "She was concerned about her family, about what she thought they might do. So she made some additions to her will, updates that she kept confidential." He opened the folder. "In her will, Eleanor left the house to you, specifically. She made it very clear that this was a separate bequest, that the house was not part of the main estate, and that nothing in her will should be interpreted as suggesting that you should share ownership or responsibility for the house with anyone else. I read the document. Eleanor's words, in her handwriting, dated just 2 weeks before the stroke that would start the decline. She also, Mr. Henderson continued, left a letter, for you. She asked me to give it to you after she passed away. I waited until now because I wanted to make sure the legal situation was completely settled. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from Eleanor. I sat in that lawyer's office and I read my grandmother's words to me from beyond death, and I cried for the first time since she'd died. The letter was short, but it said everything. My dear Sarah, I'm writing this because I know what will happen when I'm gone. I know my family. I know how they think. And I know what they'll try to do. The house is yours. It always was. It always will be. I added my name to the deed with you, not because you needed protecting, but because I wanted you to know, while I was alive, to tell you that I believed in you, that I saw you, that you were worthy. I'm putting this in writing so that if they ever question you, if they ever make you doubt what you deserve, you'll have proof. You'll have my words. You'll know that I chose you. Live in that house. Be happy in it. And when you have children, if you want them, raise them there. Make that place full of laughter and love and the kind of safety I never had growing up. You were always my favorite, even though I shouldn't say that. You were always the one I believed in. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Love, Eleanor. What I didn't know was that my family wasn't done. They'd just been regrouping. A year after Eleanor's death, my brother and his wife bought a house. A beautiful, expensive house that they really couldn't afford. They had a kid, then 2 kids. Their mortgage was huge. They were struggling financially, and they couldn't stop thinking about the house on Maple Street. My mother called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years. We need to talk, she said, about the situation with the house. There is no situation, I said. There is. Listen, Sarah, we've been thinking. You're alone in that big house. You don't have a family. You don't have kids. It's wasteful for one person to live in a property worth $2 million. Your brother has 2 children. He needs space. He needs stability. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're not seriously asking me this, I said. I'm asking you to think about your family, to think about what matters. Your brother is struggling. His kids are in a tiny apartment. Don't you care about that? I care about my brother as a person, I said carefully. But I don't care about his financial problems enough to give up my home. That's not my responsibility. My mother's voice changed. It got harder. You've always been selfish, Sarah. Eleanor saw something in you that wasn't really there. We all spoiled you. We made you think you were special. And now you're throwing it back in our faces. I hung up the phone. 2 months later, I was contacted by the IRS. Apparently, my family had reported to the tax authorities that Eleanor's house, the one I supposedly owned, had not been properly claimed on her final tax return. They'd claimed that I owed inheritance taxes on the full value of the property, that I'd essentially inherited a $2 million asset tax-free. It was a calculated move. They knew I'd have to respond. They knew I'd have to hire a lawyer. They were trying to bleed me dry financially and legally. I contacted Mr. Henderson immediately. He was apoplectic. This is harassment, he said. This is tax fraud. They're making false claims to the IRS. We can countersue for this. Can we prove it was them? I asked. Not directly, but it's obvious. And we should respond to the IRS immediately with the documentation showing that you received the property through a legal transfer while Eleanor was alive. You didn't inherit it. You were given it. The deed transfer predates her death by over a decade. We sent the documentation to the IRS. The case was resolved in 3 weeks. I owed nothing. But the message was clear. My family was willing to involve the government, to commit fraud, to try to destroy me financially, just to try to get that house. But here's where the story takes a turn. Here's where I found out something that changed everything. I was cleaning out Eleanor's desk, something I'd been avoiding for over a year, when I found a folder marked legal. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. One of them was from Eleanor's lawyer, dated from when I was a child. It was a letter about Eleanor's will, about how she was planning for the future. But another document, this one made me stop cold. It was a letter from Eleanor to my father, dated when I was 2 years old. It said, "I know you've been struggling financially. I also know that your wife is unhappy with her life, and that she blames me and blames you for that. I'm going to help you, but I'm also going to put protections in place for your children. Sarah especially. I see something in her that I don't see in the others, and I won't let her inherit your family's patterns of manipulation and resentment. If I'm going to help you now, it will be with a condition, that you let your children grow into their own people, and that you stop using money as a tool to control them. If you can do that, I'll help. If you can't, then I'll withdraw the help, and I'll make sure my assets go to someone who understands that money isn't about control. It's about freedom." I sat on that bedroom floor and I cried. Eleanor had been protecting me my entire life, not just in the last few years, my whole life, since I was a baby. She'd given my father money, money that helped them survive, money that changed my childhood. But she'd always done it with this understanding, that her grandchildren should never feel trapped by family obligation or manipulation. And when my parents started to forget that agreement, when they started to see my inheritance as a source of income for themselves, Eleanor had made sure I was protected. The house wasn't just a gift, it was her final act of protection. It was her saying, "I see what you're trying to do, and I'm not going to let it happen." Armed with this knowledge, I did something I'd never done before. I arranged a family meeting, me, my parents, my siblings, all of us. In a lawyer's office, Mr. Henderson was there. I had copies of Eleanor's letter. I had copies of my deed. I had copies of all the documentation showing the transfer of property. But more than that, I had evidence of everything they'd done. I had the bank records showing they'd been taking money from Eleanor's accounts without her permission, before her stroke even happened. I had the recordings of them discussing the house like it was already theirs. I had the documentation of the false lawsuit, the false tax claim, the attempts at coercion. Mr. Henderson went through it all methodically. By the end, my mother couldn't look at me. My father had his head in his hands. My brother was pale. "What my client is prepared to do," Mr. Henderson said quietly, "is forget about all of this. No countersuit, no further legal action, no public airing of this family's private affairs. But that's it. The house is hers. The past is finished. And any future attempts to claim ownership, to challenge the deed, or to involve third parties like the IRS in false claims will result in immediate legal action." We all sat in silence, and then my father spoke. His voice was small and broken. "I'm sorry," he said. "We were wrong. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something." After that meeting, I didn't see my family for a long time. My parents tried to reach out. Cards at Christmas, calls on my birthday. Eventually, an attempt at reconciliation. But I wasn't ready. I might never be ready. I focused on my life instead, on the house, on building something that was truly mine. I worked hard at my job. I got promoted, then promoted again. I took the skills Eleanor had taught me, confidence, boundaries, the ability to see through bullshit, and I applied them to everything I did. I renovated the kitchen. I fixed the roof. I expanded the garden. Every improvement I made, every dollar I spent, I did it knowing that it was mine, that nobody could take it away from me, that I had security. Years passed. My brother's financial situation actually improved. He got a better job. His kids grew up in that apartment, and they were fine. They were happy. And he never asked me for the house again. My mother wrote me a letter that I didn't open for 2 years. When I finally did, it was an apology. Not a perfect one, but real. She explained that she'd been frightened that they wouldn't have enough, frightened that Eleanor had loved me more, frightened that she was losing control. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. And eventually, I was able to forgive that explanation, if not the actions it motivated. My father died when I was 42. At the funeral, my mother took my hand and squeezed it. I squeezed back. It wasn't forgiveness, it was acknowledgement. We'd all been broken in different ways, and we'd all tried to heal in different ways. But here's what I want you to understand. This story isn't really about property. It's not really about whether I deserved the house or my brother deserved it or my family deserved it. This story is about what happens when people love money more than they love each other. My family didn't try to take my house because they were evil. They tried because they'd been taught, by years of financial instability, by generational patterns, by their own fears, that security comes from possession, that love is measured by what you can give, that family is a transaction. Eleanor understood something different. She understood that real love is about making people safe, about giving people something that can't be taken away, about believing in someone when they don't yet believe in themselves. The house wasn't really the point. The house was the symbol. When Eleanor put my name on that deed, she was saying something that my family never said to me. I believe you are worthy of good things. I believe you deserve security. I believe you can build a beautiful life, and I'm not going to stand in the way of that. I'm 54 years old now. I live in that house on Maple Street, the same house Eleanor gave to me all those years ago. I've raised a beautiful family here. My children grew up in this house. They knew Eleanor. They understand what she meant by putting our name on that deed. I've never married. That was a choice I made consciously, probably because of everything that happened with my family. I saw how marriage could become a cage, how shared finances could become a weapon, how love could become obligation. Instead, I built a life that was independent. I have friends who are my chosen family. I have my children. I have a career that I'm proud of. And I have this house, this beautiful, safe, protected house where no one can ever tell me I don't belong. When my mother was 78, Eleanor's age when all of this started, she came to visit me. She asked to walk through the house. I watched her look at the walls I'd painted, the furniture I'd chosen, the life I'd built. And I saw her finally understand what Eleanor had understood all along. This wasn't my house because I was lucky or entitled or special. This was my house because someone loved me enough to protect me. And that was something she'd never been able to do for me. I'm sorry, she said again, as we stood in the garden Eleanor had planted decades before. And this time, I was ready to hear it. I know, I said, and I forgive you. And I meant it. Not because what she'd done was okay, but because I'd finally understood that people do terrible things when they're scared. And I'd learned enough about myself to know that I didn't want to carry that fear for her anymore. Years later, a real estate agent came to my door. She said the neighborhood was booming. The house was worth 3 times what it had been when Eleanor first gave it to me. She could sell it for me. I could make millions. And I said no. Not because I didn't want the money. I have plenty of money now. I've done well for myself. I said no because the house isn't about money. It never was. It's about the moment Eleanor took my hands and told me I was worthy. It's about the choice I made to fight for myself. It's about every time I've sat in this house and felt safe. When my children graduate, I'll give them this house. Not because it's valuable, but because I want them to know what Eleanor knew. That security isn't something anyone can take from you if you have the strength to protect it. So let me tell you the real truth of this story. My family didn't try to take my house because they were evil people. They tried because they'd lost sight of what matters. They'd become so focused on security, the financial kind, the material kind, that they'd forgotten that real security comes from love. Eleanor gave me the house not just as a gift, but as a protection. She was protecting me from a future where I might feel obligated to sacrifice my own security for my family's comfort. She was protecting me from becoming the kind of person who puts money before integrity. and my family tried to take it because they didn't understand that difference. When people ask me what happened, when they want to know who won in this situation, I tell them this: I won. But not because I kept the house. I won because I kept myself. I won because I refused to let guilt destroy my boundaries. I refused to let family obligation override my own needs. I refused to become smaller so that someone else could feel bigger. My brother eventually bought his own house. He built his own life. And he was fine. More than fine. He just needed to understand that he couldn't have my security to get there. My mother eventually made peace with her own financial fears. She and my father lived comfortably in retirement. They didn't need my house. They just wanted it. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to say no to what someone else wants, even when it's your family. I learned that love is not the same as sacrifice. I learned that boundaries are not cruel. They're necessary. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. I learned that family is complicated, and people who hurt you often do it because they're hurting themselves. And I learned that Eleanor was right when she told me, in that last moment, to protect what's mine. Because once you lose your foundation, once you give up your security, it's so hard to get it back. If you're in a situation like this, if your family is pressuring you to sacrifice something that matters to you, if they're using guilt or obligation or love as weapons, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to. You can say no. You can protect what's yours. You can choose yourself and still be a good person. The people who truly love you will understand this. The people who don't, well, those aren't people you need in your life anyway. Eleanor gave me more than a house. She gave me permission to be selfish in the way that matters, to put my own oxygen mask on first, to build a foundation that nobody could shake, to understand that my worth isn't measured by what I'm willing to give up. That's the real inheritance. The house is still here, still beautiful, still safe. Sometimes I stand in Eleanor's garden, which is also my garden now, and I think about the 16-year-old girl who didn't know what was about to happen. The girl who trusted her family completely. The girl who almost lost the only thing that was truly hers. If I could go back and tell that girl something, I would tell her this: you're stronger than you think, and Eleanor believes in you. Hold on to that. Hold on to this house, and hold on to yourself. Because in the end, that's what it all comes down to. The house is beautiful, but I am the one who saved it, and that makes all the difference.